okay? And unfortunately, a lot of people don't.
Okay, well, let's bring in someone who has a lot of knowledge and experience with these policies. Ambassador Gina Abercrombie-Winstanley, who is the former Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer at the US Department of State. Lovely to have you back on with us, Gina, here, first of all. We'll get into the comments that President Trump made in just a moment, but for people who may not be familiar with American DEI policies, as they're known, just explain briefly why they were put in place in the first instance.
Thank you so much, Katrina. Well, they were put in place because statistically and historically, we have policies, procedures, habits in place that have impeded the normal advancement and inclusion of women and minorities in the workforce and in many different aspects of the workforce. It is against the law to hire anyone on the basis of a protected class, gender, sexual orientation, race, etc. That is against the law, and diversity, equity, and inclusion measures never have done that. So whenever anyone says a diversity hire or diversity hiring, they should be pressed. What are they talking about? Because they won't be able to identify any. Diversity, equity, and inclusion was to forward equal treatment in the workplace, equal access, equal opportunity. Because people have biases, they have expectations perhaps of what diplomats look like. European heritage men, reality. Over 80% of the senior positions in the Department of State are held by those of European heritage, white Americans. Over 60% were held by men, even though women are more than 50% of the population. Statistically, there are things that we could get after, not making people hire, but ensuring that everyone had access to pursue, to the best of their abilities, their professional advancement.
And of course, Gina, if you were still in your position today, you would have been put on administrative leave last week based on one of those executive orders that President Trump signed. He specifically named getting rid of chief diversity officers in federal departments. And one of the reasons that he and people who are in support of this initiative say is that they feel that people get jobs because, as the president would say, how they look and not because of their qualifications. Was there ever any evidence of that?
Yeah, no, there is not. This is an indication of up is down, because the whole point of diversity, equity, and inclusion is to prevent that. And let me give you an example. One of the changes made at the Department of State was to demand that senior positions be advertised and competed. Until 2022, Deputy Assistant Secretary positions were only done by word of mouth. If someone knew you, if you were in the in crowd, as it were, and somebody liked to work with you, would you even know the position was available? That kept out often women and minorities because they weren't in those in crowds. When we advertised those positions and had people compete for them on the basis of merit, that ensured, number one, it was a great inclusion, accessibility move, but it also ensured merit was truly in place. My understanding is that has been overturned. That hurts everybody. That means clearly the best candidate may not have been selected because the best candidate didn't even know to put themselves forward. And when we made the change, I was pleased that the first recipient who found a job that way by having it advertised was a white male. And I talked about that to ensure people understood the policies were good for everyone.
So when you hear the president saying what he said yesterday about specifically those in the aviation sector, about air traffic controllers, that it's led to a decline in standards, and he basically said it was his view, it may have led to this awful, awful tragedy. What were you thinking at that point?
That he was woefully informed that he has a very foundational misunderstanding of the words diversity, equity, and inclusion, and that he and those who echo his words need to be asked, some say challenged, but asked, what do they mean? What to them is the opposite of diversity? Does that mean just one group? If you're not looking for diversity, then you're just looking for one. Which group is that? If you're not looking for equity, that means you're accepting unfairness. And if you're not supporting inclusion, you are supporting exclusion. And none of those things are American values.
Okay, stay with us there, Gina. I just want to bring in our panel who are still with us, Kelly Hyman and Joe Moreno. Joe, to you first. We touched on it at the start of the programme, but I mean, Donald Trump does things quite deliberately. Why do you think it was that he jumped to start talking about this in that press conference where he was holding a moment of silence and expressing condolences?
Well, it's clear that this is an issue he is absolutely going to go to war over, right? I mean, my guess is on Wednesday night, Donald Trump already got wind that some people were blaming him that the cuts to government were responsible for this crash. And I think he probably came out the next morning determined he was going to punch back hard. Mm-hmm. I don't love the fact that he jumped to that conclusion so quickly. I mean, this absolutely needs to be investigated thoroughly and transparently. But I think a lot of Americans do support the notion that those buzzwords of diversity, equity, inclusion are sort of code words for something other than merit. That's what I think most Americans support, is selection that is merit-based only, and that is colorblind, and that is gender blind. And once you start inserting those noble and yet kind of non-merit-based attributes to try to get to some diversity goal that is never actually defined, but is aspirational, people don't like that. And so I think with Donald Trump, his timing may have been poor, but he is touching on an issue that I think many Americans are now finally free to say that we don't believe in non-merit-based systems. It's a country based on equality of opportunity, not equality of outcome.
But you've just heard Gina explain there that they are merit-based. That's the whole point of these policies, is to expand the pool of people who can apply and stop things being so closed off.
But how exactly is that being done? I mean, why would someone who is other than white and male not be able to go after the same opportunities that a white male can? I mean, these jobs are posted on USA Jobs. I mean, that's how people apply for them. And people are interviewed and vetted and selected based on the quality of their background and their skills. Mm-hmm. So once you start injecting these subjective attributes about why we think that a minority individual is better for a job based on an otherwise better qualified non-minority individual, people recoil from that. It is very un-American. Remember, we have the greatest story in history here. We have the African-American son of a single mother who worked hard, went to the top schools, and became the president of the United States. And so that's what we should celebrate, not this idea of injecting some kind of a system to kind of fight back against something called, like structural racism that I've heard that is something.
Okay, well, let's let Gina just reply to... Gina, you want to reply there? I saw you shaking your head as Joe was speaking.
Yes. Well, perhaps he didn't hear me, Jeff. I gave you an example of where a system does not allow open competition because it's not advertised. That is a truth in the Department of State and perhaps other federal agencies, where a senior position, Deputy Assistant Secretary, was not, before my office existed, openly advertised and competed. And my understanding is in the last week, it has been stopped again. That means the selection of those who get that very important senior position cannot be merit-based if only a few people are able to even know it exists. That is the difference. And statistically, that people are selected for other reasons than merit. We've done studies within the department where we see that for a particular IT position, we got a great range of people applying for the job. We had a great range of people certified that they were ready to do the job, but an individual with individual biases made the decision as to who got to be interviewed and who got selected. And that is why we ask for panels, not individual hiring managers, diverse panels, so that we can understand the range of things that people bring to the table, bring to the task.
Okay, I just want to bring Kelly in there briefly, and we'll have to take a short break there. But Kelly, we've also seen President Trump try to implement these policies in the private sector as well, encouraging people to do it. Can he do that?
He can try, but it's important to remember that diversity makes our country great. We are a country of diverse people from different backgrounds, from different experiences, and it's important that we embrace it, we realize it, and are thankful for it. And we're lucky to have diversity in our country.
Okay, well, we've lots more to talk about. Luckily, we have lots more time. So you're all going to stay with us there, Gina, Kelly and Joe. Stay with us. We'll be back in just a moment. Stay with us here on BBC News.